Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Ansible. And Ansible is a framework to run code on other machines. So it's built in a way that you are running your code on one machine and then you will promote different commands to other machines. So it's not that you deploy anything to any other machine or that you have Ansible installed everywhere and you have different clients that connect and then do operations. Everything is centralized to one machine, it connects to a different machine and then sends commands over to that over SSH. And you might wonder, why should I use Ansible? Well, let's jump over to an example here. So in my case, I have this little script here to create machines in my virtual environment, and it will create something with 20 megabytes of disk storage. It will have 2 gigabytes of memory, and it will be a Debian installed. And when I run this script, it will go all the way through the process of installing a new machine and creating a running machine for me. And I had this little script here when I wanted to set up zipt, and that I'm going to cover in a different video. But in this case, you see that it will create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different machines. And on these 9 machines, I wanted to do operations. I wanted to install stuff. I wanted to set them up in a very particular manner. And doing that machine per machine would be very tedious and very slow. So you want something that can go and do this work for you on all the different machines. So first off, if we go over to my client machine here, you need to know the IP of all the machines, of course. So you need to log in firstly on all machines and do an IP address show or whatever that different operating system requires you to do in order to get the IP address. So if we look here, this is IP address 6.34 in my system. And if we look at my hosts file here, so I've added a host file. And in this host file, I have all these machines here set up with all the different IP addresses. At the moment, only Mon1 and the client is running because I want to have some CPU left for the recording. I don't really know if I could have the whole cluster running at the same time as I record this. That I will try someday. It takes almost half of my resources of my machine, or a little bit more than half, so it might be a stretch to record at the same time. So if we have this set up here in our host file, we have everything we need in order to run Ansible. But we also need to be able to log into the different machines without requiring a password. If you want to do operations as a root user, you might need a password to become that root user. But logging into the machine should be done via client keys. That's the best way, I think. So if we look here, I have, let's see, look in my history. And the first of commands here, I created an SSH key for this. And you see here that I have SSH keygen, and then we have the type. In this case, I created an SSH key of a specific elliptic curve crypto. It creates smaller keys and is generally a better solution than RSA. At least it uses a technique that is a little bit more interesting because it's you having a point on a graph and then you draw a line through and see where the next point is. So it's new, it's very interesting. And then I need to say what machine and user I want to use. In this case I have Wooden and client EA.org. So that key I created on my machine, and then if we go over here, I have a little script called add keys. And if we go over here and look at this script, add keys, it's pretty much running a bash script, and I log into a different machine as a specific user. We can look at it here because here I haven't changed the user. So here we see that I log in as Wooden on a specific machine. I create a directory SSH, and then I will copy over the authorized keys from my machine over to this new machine. And if we look in my SSH directory here, we have the public key for this specific key that I generated, and we all have this authorized keys over here. And the published key and the authorized key, it's just a copy of it. So I take this public key and copy it over to authorized keys. And the reason I do that is that I say this current machine I have can also log in with that user without using a password. So I can log in from this machine to itself without using a password over SSH, and that's very good if you want to do operations on your machine as you do on all the other. And then we have this known host, and in this case I have all the hosts known already, but that is a way for you to know that when you log into a machine, it haven't been compromised or changed in any way. The keys that are there identifies that machine, and if you get a warning that says, okay, this is a new key, or this key you have seen before but it has changed, then you need to be very vigilant about that, because that means that you might have the wrong IP address, or the machine might have changed in a very specific manner, so it might not be the same machine that you log into again. So that's the way this known use host is used. So this add keys here, go back to that again. It will take this authorized keys and copy it over. That means that if I run this add keys mon1, it will connect to the monitor and send over these authorized keys. And if I hadn't done that before, it will ask me for the password, username and password for Wooden 2 times until it gets this. But because I can already do an SSH mon1 over to that machine without using any password, it will not ask me this time. So when I have that set up, I want to run Ansible. I want to do multiple things at once. And in order to do that you need to edit a few files. First off, we have the Ansible directory here, and we have an Ansible configuration. And you don't really need to do anything here. The configuration is pretty good as it is, but what I added here was the interpreter, Python, and the binary path to Python on all my machine. And the reason I do that is because otherwise it will give me a warning that this might change in the future. I found Python here, but I might change it in the future. And I thought that removing that warning would be a good thing, so you see all the correct messages in your logs. So adding this will say that I will use this specific Python version on all machine, and Ansible uses Python for the processing of commands, so it needs to have Python on the different machines. Most distributions comes with Python, but if you haven't installed Python, you might be required to do that as a setup step as well. So let's run Ansible then. So we can run Ansible by just saying Ansible, and then I want to run it on monitor 1, for instance. I want to have I want to run this module with specific arguments, and the standard module is just running a command on a different host. So let's say that I want to run host name on that specific machine, and then I don't need to do anything else because I can run host name as whatever user. This will connect to the monitor 1 and run the command host name. So it did that and gave me what host name this monitor had. We can also do, let's say, cat etc password. let's see if we can do that. Could do that. That's interesting. Let's see if we can do the same with shadow. And I want to do something that I can't do. So in this case, I'm not permitted to do etc shadow, because shadow is the password file that contains the specific password information. But I can do this if I say I want to become the root user. You can also say become Wooden, for instance. But in this case, I want to become root user, and that's default. And I also want large K, because I want to say that I want to give you the password for the root user in order to log in. So in this case, I want to become the root user, and I run K. And I know that I have sudo, which that's the default way to become root. And for that, I need to have my username added in order to do this. But you can also run this script with become method su, and that means that you use su instead to become root user, and then I do the root password instead to do this operation. So now I have a good setup in order to log into the different machines and becoming root user. If we then look at a script, so let's edit the prepare script here. So this is an Ansible script or an Ansible playbook. And in this case, I say that I want to run this Ansible playbook on all my machine. So what is all then? Let's go back and look at another configuration file here, etc Ansible hosts. And let's open that up. So in this file you see here, down here I have a lot of different hosts defined, and I put them in groups. So I have a Grafana server, Grafana, 2 monitors, 2 managers, 4 OSDs, and so on. So these are groups, and if I say all, I mean that this should be run on every machine in my cluster. But I can also say that I want to run it for a specific group. So for instance, on these OCDs, I might want to install a specific program. So let's go back to the script again here. So all hosts will run on all those. I want to become the root user, of course, because I need to install something. In this case, I wanted to install sudo. So when I added the keys, I didn't have sudo on these machines. I only had the su command. But we know that we can run commands becoming the root user with su with the become method. So I can run this script using the become method and add sudo. And in order to use sudo, you also need your user to be in the sudo group. So the next step I do here is adding an existing user to the sudo group. And it uses a different module here to add a user to a specific group. Then we have a host name. I want every host to have their own name. And if you have 8 different hosts and all of them are assigned to unassigned, it's very hard to keep track of them. So setting the correct host name is a good way to do that. And here we have a specific Ansible parameter called Ansible hosts, and that will give me the specific host that I'm connected to at the moment. So I can set the specific host name for this host. And then we have name copy host file to all hosts. So I do that. So this is copying over my current host file on the source machine from client over to the machine that I want to work with. And having host files on all machines, so all machines have the IP table for all the other machines, is very handy when you're working with them. And last, we have something that is run only on OCDs. And OCDs, they use a lot of storage. So in this case, they wanted to have the specific package parted in order to run that. So how do I run a playbook then? Then we type Ansible playbook and do a prepare playbook. And then I can do become, for instance, and use K and I want perhaps you to use the become method soup. So in this case, I don't need to do that because I've already run this script, so I already had sudo, but this was what I did in order to prepare my 8 machines so I can use them later on. So I run this, I give it my root password, and it will log in. And in this case, it asks for a fingerprint. And you see here that a lot of the different machines here are unreachable because they are not in my list, but the monitor was reachable and it was okay. It didn't do any changes because it had already that thing in cache. Let's stop that. So it will go through, make the changes. If it can do the changes, it will say changed. And if it's already done the changes, which is a very powerful feature, it will say, okay, I have already done this. This machine is okay. So when you are running Ansible, you can run scripts over and over and over again. But what you ensure is that what you have defined in your script as states that you want to end up in, the script will check, okay, this state is currently fine. So that means that you can have, let's say, 22 machines. Every machine should have the same setup. Then you can run the script and see that everything checks out and see that all machines are in a correct state at the moment. So that's very powerful. Let's say that we want to do Ansible, my group, but that's all the machines that are currently running. And let's see, attribute, and then hostname, and I don't want to become anything. So now it will run this on all machines, and we see here that, let's see here, is it the client or is it the monitor that requires? I had perhaps not logged into the client before. So here we see that I can do this, and in this case it says changed for both because it checked if hostname were run and it hadn't been. So in this case that's changed, that it actually did the running of hostname. But you see that it does it on both machines. And if we, let's say apt install sudo, and we have k or become, and the k method, I need to add my password. It should go through here and install both of those packages. And because it's not a specific script in this case, the script, it said that you need to install those need to be installed. It will say that this doesn't do any change. In this case, I just tell it run a command, and that's a change every time. So, but you see here that it ran the script and tried to install sudo on both machines, even though both machines had already installed those. And you see here in the script for a task for sudo, the state it wants to be, so it wants to check that sudo is present on the specific machine. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found Ansible interesting, and I hope that you learned something today. Have you been using Ansible in your system? I'm currently learning more about Ansible and Sept and so on in order to do more DevOps in our environments. And I thought Ansible was really interesting and really fun to get to learn about, and it's very powerful. You can do a lot with Ansible and save a lot of time. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. If you have used Ansible before, please tell me what your current experience of Ansible is. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and I really hope to see you in the next video.